And good evening, everyone. I hope you're well. I am joined this evening by Andrew.
Hello, everyone.
Smooth as always. I'm also still drinking tea, so this was not the world's best timed tea, it must be said.
Well, at least you've made it.
Indeed, I don't have to go off halfway in the middle of the stream like normal, so that's okay.
Well, it could be even worse. The audience could be greeted by the wind tunnel that is your kettle.
It's not that bad, and I mute in between.
It's like a jet engine.
It's not awful.
It's so loud, all the audience airs all going crazy.
Dogs are barking in the distance. Will was first, Daffod. You were second. Technically speaking, actually, I was first. I put the evening all into the D-Live chat before anything happened. So Francis has joined us as well. What a name! How long did it take for you to come up with that name? The Charity Shop Bandit. Tonight, contrary to popular belief, will be a serious stream about a serious topic. The bee is not a Viking, definitely not. He objectively has a tiny woolly hat. Good evening, Colonel Custard. How has everybody been? We've missed the hellos in the last couple of streams for some reason. We've been in a rush to get going. Beanie C. Okay, anyway, enough silliness. Andrew, we have been on a weird and interesting journey over the past, I think, 6 weeks now, isn't it? When you first set me on to the work of Mark Passio?
I think so, yeah. I think it might have been about 6 weeks.
It's certainly in that general vicinity. But anyway, my general journey to getting here is relatively straightforward, basically. When I was young, I decided to be big-brained, which is not something that ever really worked out for me, but oddly enough, for once it did. I decided to just go onto YouTube and put in philosophy and see what would come up. And I stumbled across Stefan Molyneux. Started listening to him, quite enjoyed it, got into the non-aggression principle, and then held that position for a really long while, and then slightly faded away from that and went down the UKIP route of the extreme, freedom-loving libertarian position. And now I'm back to the non-aggression principle. So as we've all agreed, so do you have something to say, Andrew?
I'm going to say, is that the silence for my weird and wonderful journey?
Yeah, yours was a little bit more convoluted.
Convoluted and controversial, I think I'd say.
Maybe slightly on both fronts, but definitely convoluted. You certainly bounced around like a ping pong ball or something.
Yeah.
out of that Vicky bird you were going on about.
Oh God.
Anyway, everyone has always agreed that pulling away from the system is the best way forward. By everyone, I mean all of us. We've agreed this because we're reasonable adult people, basically.
Plus, it's a basic process of elimination. Like we've seen all the freedom movements in the greatest general sense of that term, and what they've tried to do, and none of them have actually worked. So, pulling away and just completely disengaging is the only way forward. I think it's safe to say now that the political system is a complete farce. Yeah.
Why do you think none of them have worked? Do you think it's purely because they are. Do you think it is purely because the system is so against them, or is there more to it? They don't call me off guard. I'm sorry.
Because I think it was, unfortunately, it was set up so that the direction that the various people went in wasn't able to be successful. I mean, look at the political system. You've got basically two wings that are presented as opposition, but when you go down to the core of what they're about and the direction that their policies are implemented, they're all the same. It's like two different flavors of ice cream, but you might not want ice cream. So it's you don't get the choice of anything else.
I saw just to re-emphasize this point, I saw an opinion piece. I'm trying to remember who the hell it was by. It basically, it was just after the Labour Party conference thing, and the main gist of this person's opinion, in no uncertain terms, were the Conservatives are evil, and Starmer is stupid because he wants to tax the wrong people more. When in reality, the root of the problem is that they want to tax people to begin with. And this person obviously just couldn't get it. And there's been, we all know this, loads of people just don't understand this basic premise of violence is bad. Doesn't matter what good you do with it afterwards, the initiation of violence to begin with is an immoral act. And that to me is partly why none of these freedom movements really work. They're not starting off in a good place. They're not starting off on a solid foundation. They've missed the initial point.
Well, it's anything like the trying to achieve power through the electoral process is doomed to fail, not only because of that, but the system is set up so that anybody who actually wants change, regardless of what that change is, it's not, they're going to be stopped from getting in.
Mm-hmm.
The coalitions will be created to stop them from achieving that power. And even if they do get in, the civil service is so entrenched that it will just stop them from doing anything. And the same with the courts. I mean, look at what we saw with in America over the last few years.
The Cheeto in chief.
Everything he tried to do, the judges basically stopped it.
Mm.
So the political route, in that sense, is a complete waste of time. The sort of, shall we say, armed resistance one is a complete no-no as well. That should be pretty obvious. For a start off, you don't even have, it's not like Northern Ireland where you have, entrenched militant communities.
Mm-hmm.
People are just individuals. Even small groups, you're not going to achieve anything. It's just a complete waste of time, to say the least. So the only way forward through that process of elimination is this pulling away. There's no other third option. There's no other fourth option. But yes, in terms of the morality aspect, it comes down to how the power is used anyway, and should that power even exist to begin with.
What do you mean by how it's used anyway?
Well, it's not it's used to control people. It's used to stop people who want to engage in voluntary actions that don't hurt anybody else. I mean, that people's rights, a right is any action that does not cause harm to any other sentient being. That is what a right is. It's not, and these rights don't come from governments and legislature from man. It comes from nature. It's inherent. It's immutable. No one can take it away from you. And so, would you like to chime in?
It is incredibly frustrating because on one hand it's an enormous subject. On the other hand, it's so incredibly simple. It can't get any simpler. Violence is bad. It's the sort of thing we teach children. Meanwhile, any and every interaction with the government is violence. Nobody wants to tax their cars. We have to do it. Why do we have to do it? Because the government has said we have to. What happens if we don't? They come along and they steal your vehicle. That's basically what they do. They can call it impounding. They can call it debt collection. They can call it whatever the hell they feel like. The reality is they are coming along. They are then stealing your property and saying, "Oh, well, you should have paid us." It's a racket. But the literal definition of racket, pay us or bad things are going to happen to you.
Well, if you take away the government and the police and just think of it in terms of me and Jordan going up to somebody and saying, you owe us 10% of your income or else we will kidnap you. People instinctively say that and recognize that that's not a good thing. That's a protection racket. Well,
people
the
instantly look at that and
say,
say, "You're a psycho. Go away."
Just because we have men, large amounts of men and guns in uniforms called the police, and they're representing a institution, a corporation made up of many men and women called the government, doesn't change anything. It's still a violation of people's rights. It's still violence. Violence is a violation of rights.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an important point to make out, that something like boxing is not a violent sport because both parties have voluntarily chosen to fight, to engage in that sport. Mm-hmm. It's a contest of force. Whereas violence is the violation of rights. It's somebody walks up to you and punches you in your face for no reason. That's violence. And violence is always immoral.
It's the sort of thing we teach children, yet for some reason, when it becomes a societal thing, that sort of logic doesn't apply, apparently. Well, people certainly act as if it doesn't, and there's no reason for it at all. There's no reason for us to not apply these same basic rules to society as a whole.
Well, it comes down to language and the use of language to manipulate people. And instead of things like theft, they call it taxation. Mm-hmm. Instead of kidnapping, they call it arrest, imprisonment.
Yeah, it legitimizes it. Because it doesn't have the same word that you would use if it was just a private engagement, it is somehow now legitimate. It doesn't change the basic underlying actions, and this is really what I've been carrying out in my own life now for the last week or so. It's really bloody tricky to do, honestly. I've not coined the phrase, but I've taken on board the phrase, get to the root of the problem. And obviously when it comes to these sort of things, like thoughts, actions, political things, it's very helpful because everything always boils down to the same basic premise of somebody engaging in violence. But on a personal level, it's quite difficult to do because you have to be honest with yourself about it. You know, what is this problem that I'm facing? How much of this is my fault?
I think also the understanding the root, the etymology of the words is so important. Mm-hmm. It's very interesting starting to go into the words and you start to see how it's being manipulated, how language has been used to manipulate people. And we're all very much aware of things like the 1984 double think, and how it's applied today with words changing. And a perfect one that's just popped to mind: gay. Gay used to mean happy. Because I'm in a gay mood. Well, don't say that today, because it means something completely different. And I think that's a minor thing. I don't think that is a major part of the system of control, but it does show you how the language changes and how it's being changed. And it's a very interesting thing to go down to it, especially when you go into the Latin and the classical Greek of words. And I've just recently got a classical Greek and a Latin dictionary to start going down into the etymology of terms, of words. So that's going to be very interesting.
But do you want to go down the etymology of government?
I
find this really interesting because when you look it up online, people poo-poo it. They say, "Oh no, there's nothing to do with this. It comes from the French word, and that is derived from the Greek word, which means to steer a ship." It's like, you're really stretching. The word itself, government, basically, I don't know the exact Latin words, but it does basically...
governare. It's governare, which is to control.
Mm-hmm.
And then
the second part?
Mens, as in mentis, which means mind.
Exactly, it just said mind control. And the reason I say that they're really stretching to say that it isn't mind control is because of things like the bits team. The bits team exists. They're completely and utterly open about this. They are as blatant as you could possibly get. They are deliberately trying to socially engineer people. They are deliberately trying to mind control people into behaving in ways that they want to behave. So if the word itself, government, can be broken down into mind control, and then the government is outright saying, yes, we want to control people's minds, odds are, even if the word itself doesn't directly 100% translate into, or the etymology of it isn't 100% dead on. We did indeed get it from the French and the Greek and all of that nonsense. Fine. Doesn't change the basic reality of it, though. That these people are really desperately trying to control people.
Well, if you
They're trying to control our minds.
Well, to control a population, control people, the bodies of people, you need a lot of force.
Mm-hmm.
And that amount of physical force is not available. Whereas if you can control people's minds, then you de facto control their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, you don't need the force.
Exactly.
I mean, if everyone today decided, right then, I'm going to procure a firearm, a pistol, let's say, and let's say 1 million people in the UK, in England, decided that and own pistols, there would not be enough police and military, and they would not be able to use the sort of force necessary to round everybody up. Therefore, they would have to make it legal.
Mm-hmm. That's basically what happened in California with the weed laws.
Yeah, all those. My understanding is it was hidden farms, like hidden crops in the wheat, and there was so much of it that they just could not handle it. They couldn't stop it, so they just had to make it legal. Same with prohibition. And by doing that, well, they were faced with the choice basically: try and crack down even harder, in which case it looks like it's completely using unjustified levels of force. I mean, if you're walking up to people and shooting them dead because they happen to grow cannabis, it's a bit of an escalation. It's not going to be accepted. Or they don't do anything. They continue to do things as they are, and they look weak because they can't control people anymore. And then more and more people think, oh, well, these people are getting away with it, perhaps I'll do it. And people also think, if they're getting away with that, what else can we get away with? And then it goes down into that that virtuous cycle of people ignoring the government.
I love what St. Francis has said. They've weaponized people against themselves.
Exactly.
That is absolutely spot on.
But it's not just in terms of what we're just talking about. The weaponization of people against themselves is in other areas as well. You see how like your base desires are used against you as well. I think it was E. Michael Jones. I think he did a book called Libido Dominandi that talks about how the sexual desires have been weaponized against people, and you see that you certainly see that in the wider society. Watch pop music videos, for example, in the gym.
Thank you very much, Sergeant Fairy Tales. Fairy Tales, right? Not Fairy Tales. Anyway, what was the next point? I've gotten distracted with chat.
Haven't you've got it written down?
Oh, that was it. Fake anarchy.
Well, let's go into the definition of anarchism first, because
fair enough.
The pulling away from society is, we've already established, is the only way forward. The creation of what is called intentional communities, which is basically voluntary association. So you can have it on based on values, on ethnicity, on religion, dietary. It
can be based on whatever you feel like.
Oh yeah, hobbies. It can be anything. That is obvious. That is going to be the way forward. People voluntarily associating with people who they feel the most comfortable with, and therefore voluntarily disassociating with people who they don't want to be around or don't agree with. And that comes into anarchism, and what it actually is. So the definition of anarchism is rules, but rules without rulers. And the etymology of it is Greek. It's two parts, an, archon. So a is a negation of, and whereas archon is a master, is like a master of slaves, a rule that's forced upon you. So that is anarchon, anarchy, without rulers. And it has, with rules, it's rules of the natural law. So you're talking the non-aggression principle and self-defense. So anarchy being classed as chaos is complete contradiction in terms. You can't have anarchy and chaos. The two are completely opposites. Now, real anarchists versus fake anarchists. Well, a lot of fake anarchists, and you probably can name some groups in the chat.
Well, the Sex Pistols, for example.
Yeah, but they made good music.
Oh God, I knew you'd say that. It's interesting, once again, how the media have manipulated these things. I was thinking earlier on. I mentioned to you while I was watching one of Mark Bassio's videos. He mentioned the phrase "social engineer," and then it got me down this rabbit hole of how the media are just social engineers. They're very, very, very low-level social engineers, but that's what they are. And this is a prime example of it. This concept that anarchy is mayhem, is chaos. It is purely a media-derived thing. Because right now, all of this that we're doing, us being here, chat being there, it's anarchy. There's no rulers in this. There's no one saying, you must sit down and listen.
Well, if you think about every aspect of your life on a daily basis, there's not many. It's basically an anarchist lifestyle anyway. The government isn't telling you what to do for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Your actual daily interactions with the government is very few and far between. It's just they impose themselves on you in certain ways. For example, cars. You need to get it taxed. You need to get it licensed. You need to put fuel in it while the fuel is being taxed. It's things like that. There's very rarely is the government standing there saying, you've got to do this thing.
On the quick point about anarchists versus fake anarchists, if you disagree with somebody, you don't get to commit acts of violence against them in order to try and shut them up. If you do that and you call yourself an anarchist, then you're not actually an anarchist. End of. It's as simple as that. And as I say, you can all put in chat these the groups you can probably think of. You just don't get to do that.
Anarcho-communists are a prime example of that.
Yeah.
The mind games those people play absolutely baffle me. Like you believe there should be no government. Okay, well, I own this piece of equipment. No, you don't own it. You can't own it. It's the communities. The community owns it. Flipping heck. It's like status with the flipping roads. They just can't get over the roads. I agree with Dave. A proportion of us who dig our heels in because we feel like we're socially pressured into doing things. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
To be fair, do Antifa actually claim to be anarchists?
Well, if you look
I suppose they do, don't they? Yeah.
Well, you look at the pictures of them. They have, they like to LARP with the anarchist symbol, and then of course, in people's minds, people they see them, they see the absolute destruction of private property. Some poor sod's car being burnt up, or vandalized, and then they see the anarchist symbol and they put two and two together, and unfortunately, they make five, and that's where where anarchism has a bad name. I mean, you type in on your, hopefully not Google, but your favorite search engine, and on the images, and just type in anarchism and see what comes up.
Right, let's do that right now. Let's see how many of these are Antifa. I reckon a lot.
A lot of pictures of fiery but peaceful protests.
You mean every protest? Sure. Oh, we got a protest going on here. What's happening here? Anarchy. What is why pop culture loves it? Really? I didn't realise pop culture loved it. Ah, yes, I remember that time that we had absolute anarchy right behind it. Anarchist action figures. Yes, this looks very... the thing I love about these people, they love to claim they're individuals, then they all dress the same. I know that's not exactly a big brain take, everyone said it, but you cannot get over it. How many little red heads do we see in this picture? I bet it's going to be at least 10. But here's one. Bright red noggin. Flipping heck, lad. And no, you can't see anyone else's hair because they're all wearing hoods. Whoever they vote for, we are ungovernable. That's why we're all standing behind the line. God. Honestly, these people. Fully
Looks like
agree
the
with
guy on
that.
it looks like the guy on the far left is ready for our current situation. It was ahead of the time.
I love the gloves, the little blue gloves. Oh God, no! We need to get rid of that. That's depressing. Everyone has said funded by globalists, although the government's useful idiots. Fully agree. Everyone's on the same page with this one. David asks, why do the media side with leftists who represent a tiny, infinitesimally tiny percentage of the population? The reason is because they are social engineers and they're trying to push people in towards that way of thinking. This is why words and concepts and thoughts and ideas are so incredibly important. Because when you start to pull on a string, you can just keep running with it. And eventually you come up with good little catchy phrases. Like calling the media social engineers. Next time we get into an argument or a discussion with a family member or something, just try and call them social engineers as opposed to the media and see the reaction from the other person. I guarantee it's going to be different. I haven't tried it yet. I just have this internal feeling that it's going to be very, very different.
Or referring to the police as thugs, especially when you see them absolutely destroying some elderly woman, punching her face in.
I think if you call them, even though I do agree in calling them thugs, I think if you call them thugs, they're going to become defensive of it. Whereas if you call them order
terrorists.
followers,
Well,
acceleration.
If we were to do the sorts of violence that the police were doing and are doing, we would be called terrorists, and probably rightfully so. Let's call a spade now.
Well, I was just trying to back it and calm it down just a little tiny bit, but no, apparently we've gone from they're a mob, they're unruly and unworthy of anything, to they're just terrorists. Yeah, anyway, I was going to say, if we go down the line of order followers, because that's exactly what they are, no one can really complain about that. And then it opens up a new line of questioning. Why are they just following orders? And I think that's an interesting line of attack, because if nothing else, we don't like people who just follow orders. Like, we have an issue with that. We don't like people we perceive as being mindless. Even the left, when the far crazy leftists that nobody really listens to, or let alone likes, when they talk about the basket of deplorables, as it were, they see them as empty-headed, mindless, just going along with what the media told them to do. We all have that intrinsic hatred of people who don't think for themselves. Bootlickers, exactly.
NPCs, another one. They really didn't like that meme.
But they may not have liked it, but they embraced it. What was that thing? It was the NHS, wasn't it? They did a bloody advert with the NPC meme on it. It makes you wonder, are they genuinely this way, or are they in on it? Or are they just mocking us?
I think it does become hard to tell. Somebody might have adopted it and does it as a bit of mockery.
I don't know. We know what these groups are like. They do enjoy mocking us.
They like mocking their own followers.
Well, they do, which is another really bloody interesting thing. I think that's a separate stream altogether, though.
Yeah, the mockery of police and military. Yeah, that's that requires quite a bit of a lead up before you get into that part.
Yeah, otherwise that's like turning the fireworks on full blast and drinking from it, isn't it? You're gonna inflate like Bugs Bunny or something. Anyway, was there any more you wanted to cover on this evening?
I think objective morality versus moral relativism is an incredibly important point that we need to address. So, moral relativism is really comes down to where does morality come from. So, if people believe that morality comes from man, then it goes to reason that the whims of man change. Of course they do. Legislation change, and therefore morality is changed, and that's moral relativism, and that's what we've got now. Whereas recognizing objective morality, that morality goes above man. Now you can choose what you actually want to call it. Some people might call it God or nature or the universe or all consciousness, etc. Mm-hmm. But the important point being that it is immutable. You cannot change it. It is the non-aggression principle and self-defense. Now, this is the core of all the problems that we've got, because as people can probably extrapolate, if you believe in moral relativism, well, it gets to the point where, as we've said previously today, the government can change laws, and if it becomes people think that violence and theft from the government is okay, whereas if it's done by individuals, it's wrong. And that is a perfect example of moral relativism. Plus, if you take it to its logical conclusion as well, you don't really have much of a leg to stand on when it comes to absolute horrors that people can do to people, especially things like children. Mm-hmm. Because if it's relative, people can say, well, this person agrees with it, but that person doesn't, and you just got different values. Whereas moral relativism, violation of people's rights is wrong, regardless of what people believe. And I think perhaps to finish off, unless Jordan wants to say something afterwards, if we actually want a free society, a society where we get to have and get to exercise our own rights, then we need to recognize objective morality, and then after recognizing that, we need to start putting it into action. That is what's going to cause. That's what's going to lead to a free society. If we continue down this path of moral relativism, and therefore putting that out there through our actions, we're going to continue down this path of slavery. So I think it's something that people need to mull on and think about, and hopefully they can start putting these thoughts into action. I think I'll leave it there.
I've had 20 points I want to pull on, and I can't get my thoughts in order to do it. So yeah, the general gist is, as you can tell, is we are. I'm not even going to say we're changing direction. We're not so much changing direction as just going one level deeper. We've always held the opinion that government is bad, but we've always kind of played the game, as it were. We've said that there is an element for it. There is a small requirement for a tiny, tiny government. And all we've done now is just strip that away. Because it is basically a lie. Right? If it doesn't make any sense, there is no real legitimate place for it. Thereby, by propagating the idea that it is, or that there is a place for government, you are in effect lying. Government never has been legitimate. It never will be legitimate because it is based upon something that is immoral in the first place. It is based upon the initiation of violence against others. And any action that does that is immoral. It doesn't matter whether it's a societal level or an individual level. If you go along to someone and say, I'm going to give you like 100 grand, and in a week's time, you're going to pay me back 110 grand, or I'm going to break your legs, that's an immoral action. Now, if someone for whatever reason decides that, yeah, I want to go along with that, you give me 100 grand and I'll give you 110 next week, then fair enough. That's on them. But the initial threat, no. The coercion is no good. David has opened a can of worms. It is a can of worms and an interesting one as well, because this can definitely be dealt with privately, based upon the fact that we all have right to our own land, and if we're in proper communities, people wouldn't be able to just come along and take them. There is a very good reason why they've only expanded into other empires. Didn't fare terribly well in the Germanic lands. Didn't fare terribly well over in the Caucasus. Even the Byzantine Empire, when that was around, the East Roman Empire, that didn't do terribly well over there either. And the reason for that is because lands that are effectively stateless are impossible to deal with. You can't invade these places. Look at literally the last 20 years. We've been at war in Afghanistan. It's not gone well. You can't invade somewhere where they just fundamentally do not pay attention to you. Yeah, as Antip's told me. Anyway, is that all for this evening?
I think we might have blown the audience's brains a bit more.
Hopefully.
I think leave it there, and this is definitely a subject that we'll keep going back to.
Definitely.
I mean, this is
mainly because it's interesting. Also because... Sorry, go on.
It's fascinating, and it's a very deep subject. This is like a surface layer. Wait until we get into the really... the really deep stuff.
But it's not only surface layer, but it's also where we are just starting to explore this line of reasoning. It is... We're basically like little baby brains, is what I want to say. We're still fashioning it out internally. We're still trying to work out the best ways to do it, and I hope you guys all appreciate that as well. We're trying to get this information across to you so we can all go to our families and friends and say, this is the state of play. Things need to change. It comes down to the self-improvement that's on the bottom right there.
I think I'd like to just take evidence violates community guidelines point, if I may. If you can pop that up.
Where'd it go? There it is. Good evening, by the way, mate.
Yep. Good evening. Yeah, the radical individualists, that's not really the way that I'm heading, at least. Obviously, I recognise individual rights, but we are talking about communities here, rebuilding communities with people who you actually care about and who care about you. So you'll have a collective, in quote, well, not really a collective, you're not an arbitrary group of people that are banded together. You'll have a community, and you'll defend yourself in accordance with that community. So if on a smaller level, let's say, if one of the children of your community are walking around and playing around, and then some dodgy character outside of your community comes up to them and starts talking to them, every person, every adult in that community is going to be thinking, hold on a minute, what's happening there? And they're going to be looking and they're going to be observing and thinking, right then, that child may not be my child, but it's the child of somebody within my community. And I've got a duty to make sure that child's protected. And if something happens, well, they'll step in. And if you extrapolate that out to an hostile collective, if such a thing actually came about, well, you'll have a community that's prepared to deal with that.
Exactly.
I mean,
just because anarchy is without rulers doesn't mean it's without rules.
I mean,
there are societal things going on there.
I mean, I don't know if people have come across this idea of the sheep and the sheepdog and the wolves concept. I can't remember where it originated from, but it's an American thing, really about self-defense. The sheepdogs being the armed civilians armed people who want to protect the communities. The sheep are the people who just sort of go along to get along and don't take their self-defense seriously. And then you've got the wolves who are the criminals. Well, there's always going to be people who are prepared to arm themselves and to protect their communities. I mean, me, for example, I love shooting. I've shot legally, of course, and it's something I'm absolutely passionate about. In fact, I got into politics at the start because I wanted to buy. I shot some firearms, loved it, and then thought, "Wow, how do I get hold of one of these?" And found out that they need this thing called a license, and all the best stuff wasn't legal in the UK. So I thought that was pretty odd. I wonder why, and I went down that rabbit hole. Thus, I started politics. But yeah, there's always going to be people like me who will happily spend ungodly amounts of time, both in the gym and on the range. I mean, so yeah, I don't think that'll be a problem. Actually, I know it won't be a problem.
No, definitely not.
Plus, there's not going to be a government saying, "Oh, you can't own a light machine gun." Like, no, I kind of want one. I kind of want a tank with all the bells and whistles working. But yeah, I hope that answers the question. Or gives you something to think about, anyway.
It's certainly one we could. I have a feeling we could do on that one, to be honest, because there's all the intricacies. There's the broad brushstroke that we're trying to lay out in these sort of streams, and then there are individual issue streams, as it were.
Well, like what Tasha has said, first place of the NAP, non-aggression principle, non-initiation of the use of force, is between parents and children, where there should be no form of physical punishment. So that's I think that's called peaceful parenting, no spanking or anything like that. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I do too. Thank you for that, Dave. Anyway, given that is all, you're off for the evening. I will be popping onto Discord for a little bit, probably. Well, certainly, actually. So yeah, if anybody wants to join us, by all means, do link to that in chat. Slowly, because I didn't have it ready. Andrew, cover for me.
Well, I've been told
not to do it. There we go. I remember. It's okay now. Oh yes, basic computerizing. Don't you worry about it. I can get there eventually. Oh no, I'm logged in. Oh no. Whatever. Who cares? Everyone knows where Discord is. If you don't, please ask. And I will see you there. Bye for now.
Goodbye.